What happens when a guest walks onto somebody else's milestone night, appears to take command of the cameras, stretches the spotlight into her own personal production, and then the actual man being celebrated walks straight into that frame and seemingly refuses to play along? Because that is the controversy exploding around this footage, and the awkwardness is almost impossible to miss. Meghan Markle arrived at David Foster's gala as an invited guest, but within minutes the cameras captured a sequence that critics immediately began dissecting. Red carpet positioning, playful filming around the musicians, Harry being pulled into the moment, and an increasingly strange sense that a night carrying somebody else's name was somehow generating an enormous amount of Meghan-centered material. Then came the moment everything changed. David Foster entered the picture, and suddenly the polished smiles, carefully captured interactions, and seemingly effortless performance collided with the host, who appeared far more interested in moving through his own event than creating another camera-ready exchange. And that is exactly why this footage has triggered such fierce commentary, because critics are not simply asking whether one photograph looked uncomfortable. They are asking whether this was another example of Harry and Meghan entering a high-profile event and somehow becoming the story themselves. This setting makes that question even louder. This was not an anonymous celebrity party where everyone was chasing attention with phones raised in the air. This was a David Foster Foundation gala in Victoria, Canada, connected to years of fundraising work and carrying the weight of a deeply established organization. Yet somehow, after the footage emerged, the conversation became dominated by one painfully awkward question: did Meghan turn another person's major evening into the Meghan show? Harry and Meghan were invited guests, and on paper, there should have been absolutely nothing complicated about the arrangement. Walk in, acknowledge the cause, smile for photographs, congratulate the people responsible for the evening, and allow the event to continue. Simple. Except critics watching the footage argue that what unfolded looked considerably more calculated than simple attendance. And here is where one seemingly minor detail becomes enormous. This was not merely another yearly appearance for Foster. The event represented roughly 4 decades of gala fundraising connected with his foundation and was being presented as the conclusion of this particular long-running gala format. Think about what that means. Those photographs were part of a milestone. The red carpet mattered. The images mattered. The people whose foundation created the evening had every reason to expect their own uninterrupted moment rather than becoming supporting figures inside somebody else's viral content. Therefore, had every reason to want straightforward photographs with Mac Foundation supporters, guests, and the people actually being honored. If there were ever an evening when the person behind the event should not have to compete for his own camera frame, this was surely it. Yet Meghan arrived completely prepared for cameras, and everything about the appearance immediately looked polished enough to travel far beyond that carpet. It was reportedly from a Canadian designer she had not previously worn publicly, an almost perfectly location-specific choice that instantly gave fashion coverage another angle. Nothing unusual about dressing carefully for a gala, of course, but critics argue that this is where the distinction between simply attending and actively producing an appearance begins becoming fascinating. Jewelry, styling, entrance footage, and carefully captured interactions all became individual pieces of a larger visual package. Dressing beautifully for a red carpet is completely normal. Being photographed is normal. Laughing, dancing, and greeting musicians are normal. But stack those moments together: entrance, musicians, conversation, dancing, positioning, photographs, and suddenly critics see something else. Not merely attendance, but production. And that accusation becomes even more explosive because the footage repeatedly appears to find Meghan exactly when another shareable moment is happening. Came the musicians. Meghan moved through the bagpipers and drummers while cameras captured the interaction, laughing and announcing that her husband loved bagpipes even though Harry was standing right there beside her. Critics seized on that tiny sentence because it seemed almost absurdly revealing to them. Why speak for the person standing inches away? Why narrate his reaction when he can react himself? Maybe it was nothing more than casual conversation, but within the interpretation being pushed by commentators, the positioning looked almost cinematic. Meghan reacting in front, Harry beside her, musicians surrounding them, and a camera conveniently preserving the entire exchange. A completely ordinary entrance had suddenly become another polished little scene. And that is where the mystery starts getting uncomfortable, because nothing outrageous needed to happen for this footage to generate attention. The musicians were simply performing. Guests were simply arriving. Harry could simply enjoy the bagpipes bagpipes. Yet cameras captured the laugh, the reaction, and the conversation, creating exactly the kind of compact moment that travels perfectly across social media. Critics saw packaging rather than coincidence, and once that suspicion entered the conversation, every little interaction afterward began looking different, because the question was no longer simply what Meghan was doing at the gala. The question, becoming impossible for critics to ignore, was much sharper. Who exactly was controlling the spotlight, and what would happen when David Foster finally stepped into his own frame? Then, Harry began speaking directly with the musicians, and suddenly the camera had something different to capture. For a few seconds, Harry had his own conversation, his own interaction, his own space inside the moment, while Meghan remained behind him and still visible inside the shot. It sounds ridiculously small, almost meaningless, but critics watching this evening frame by frame immediately treated it like another clue. Whenever the focus appeared to drift away from Meghan, commentators argued that another Meghan-centered moment seemed to emerge soon afterward. And then came the dancing footage. Meghan was moving and visibly animated while Harry remained seated, creating another contrast that instantly attracted attention. Other people were dancing too, so the dancing itself proves absolutely nothing scandalous, but critics focused on the visual difference. Meghan performing enthusiastically while Harry appeared considerably less interested in participating. Some online commentary even claimed there had been tension between them, though the footage alone cannot establish exactly what was being said. What viewers could see was Harry staying seated while Meghan appeared to repeatedly communicate with him, and that image became yet another piece of footage people began analyzing. But the real red carpet controversy was still waiting, because David Foster was not some inexperienced celebrity wandering helplessly toward photographers. David Foster has spent decades around entertainment, cameras, stages, press lines, and famous people, meaning the idea that somebody needed to organize his own photograph already looked bizarre to critics. Katharine also had years of entertainment experience, yet Meghan could be seen gesturing while the group assembled, appearing to help arrange where people were positioned. And that is where the criticism suddenly became much sharper. Why was an invited guest apparently helping manage the photograph at David Foster's event? Why did anybody need to direct the frame at all? Maybe Meghan believed she was simply being helpful. Maybe the gestures were being overanalyzed. But after everything viewers had already watched, the musicians, the filming, the dancing, and the constant camera-ready moments, the optics were brutal. Harry and Meghan had already been photographed. Their arrival existed. Their outfits had been captured. Their presence at the event had been established. Under ordinary red carpet logic, critics argued that should have been the moment to move forward and allow the people behind the evening to receive their own photographs. Instead, Harry and Meghan remained in the space as Foster and Meghan entered the same area, and suddenly the entire mood appeared to change. Foster approached without the enormous greeting some viewers might have expected. There was no obvious dramatic embrace with Meghan, no explosive display of warmth, and no visible attempt to transform the encounter into another special Meghan moment. His attention appeared directed elsewhere while Meghan adjusted herself and her dress, and Harry looked noticeably stiff. The glossy energy surrounding the earlier footage seemed to disappear almost instantly. And then came the image that sent the commentary into overdrive. Meghan appeared to extend herself toward the interaction while Foster continued moving. Was Foster deliberately ignoring her? The footage cannot prove that. He could have been concentrating on photographers, finding his position, or simply moving through a chaotic red carpet. But visually, it was savage. After appearing so comfortable helping organize the scene moments earlier, Meghan suddenly looked like somebody who could no longer control what the scene was giving back. Critics called that the backfire. The cameras she had appeared completely comfortable around were now capturing an interaction that looked painfully awkward. And that is why the controversy did not disappear with one photograph. Had Meghan simply arrived, smiled, posed, and moved forward, critics argue there might have been nothing worth discussing. Instead, every additional second created another question. Why did this appearance produce so many separate Meghan moments? Why did the cameras keep finding another interaction, another reaction, another performance? Even inside the gala, footage showed Meghan seated beside Harry while appearing to repeatedly urge him to get up, while Harry remained seated and did not immediately respond. Once again, viewers were left watching the same strange contrast. Meghan visibly trying to generate movement while Harry seemed perfectly comfortable doing absolutely nothing. And by then, what began as an ordinary glamorous gala appearance had transformed into something much messier, a debate over attention, cameras, control, and whether somebody else's milestone evening had somehow become another chapter in the endless Meghan spectacle.